walking around in an empty void. Shiro didn't know what she was doing here. Confusion filled her mind, but seeing that she was alone, her heart pounded in anxiety. Where's everyone else? She thought to herself as she started to hyperventilate. Panting heavily, she dashed forward in hopes of finding her friends. However, no matter how much she ran or how fast, she couldn't see the end of this void. Clutching her chest, she was forced to kneel down as pain filled her face. Gritting her teeth, she heard some footsteps approach her as she quickly looked back and saw the watchman gripped Icilia by the neck. Widening her eyes, she immediately charged at him with anger. Arg! Punching towards him, she phased through him as she wasn't able to damage him at all. Stumbling over herself due to the lack of connection, she could only look back as he killed Icilia with her not being able to do anything. Sorry, look after Lyrica for me, okay? Hearing Icilia's final words again, tears started to fall as Shiro desperately climbed back to her feet, only to phase through the watchman again. Asterisk crack. Snapping her eyes open, Shiro started to panic on her bed as her chest ached from her wounds. Looking around her, she saw that she was alone in the med bay. Ignoring the pain in her body, she gritted her teeth and forced herself out of bed. Collapsing on the floor, her breathing quickened as she grabbed the closest chair to help her walk. She needed to see them. Anyone would do, even if it's just one person. Please, even one person would do. Making her way to the door slowly with the chair, she tried to open the door, but couldn't even muster up any strength. Seeing that she couldn't even open a simple door, Shiro burst into laughter as she collapsed against the wall and hugged her knees. Tears started to fall as she remembered Icilia's face. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Apologizing over and over in her mind. She didn't know how she was even supposed to protect Lyrica when she couldn't even open a door. Even when she had all of that power. Even when she prided herself to be stronger than the other queens. Even when she had the help of gods, she couldn't stop the person from taking Icilia from her. What's the point of all that power when she couldn't stop her best friend from being taken away? Spiraling down with negative thoughts, Shiro clutched her knees in fear of leaving this room. What if she left and no one had survived? What if the future had come true and everyone died but her? What if, asterisk, bang. Hearing the door slam open, Shiro looked up slowly and saw Nantion panting by the doorway. He ran to the med bay as soon as he sensed movement. Seeing Shiro hugging her knees in the corner with tears down her face, he felt 1,000 needles piercing his heart. Kneeling in front of her, he sighed. Don't move around too much, your body is still injured. Nantion muttered as Shiro scrambled to her feet and grabbed him with her shaking hands. Making sure that he was real, she sighed in relief before collapsing again. Quickly catching her before she fell on the floor, Nantion carried her to the bed, but Shiro refused to let go of him. Opening her mouth, Shiro wanted to say please don't go, but her throat was still damaged, so all that came out was incoherent calls. I'll stay, don't worry. Nantion reassured with a soft smile. Placing her on the bed, he pulled out a tablet and sat down on a chair, turning her head so that she could keep him in her sights at all times. Shiro watched silently, while Nantion felt like his heart was suffocating. He wanted to do something to help her, but they couldn't rush this. I wanted her to depend on me, but not like this. He thought to himself, since he had always wanted to help her. Sighing softly, he thought about what they've gained and lost during this excursion to the mountains. While the corrupted relic is destroyed, the cost of doing so was great. Icilia and Edvamar were gone. Shiro was weakened both physically and mentally, and all of their plans have halted. It was unsure whether or not Shiro could recover, but news of this couldn't be spread to the outside. Sensing some movement outside of the med bay, Nantion glanced up and could sense that Madison and Lyrica were coming over. Madison probably told everything to Lyrica. Nantion thought as Lyrica's aura seemed weak right now. It lost the flare it had originally. Hearing a few knocks on the door, Nantion opened his mouth. Come in. Walking into the med bay, Lyrica faltered seeing Shiro's state and took a deep breath. Pulling over a chair, Lyrica sat down next to Shiro. I heard everything from Madison. It's not your fault. I don't know what I can say or do to lessen your guilt. It's pathetic. You've helped me get out of my dump, but I can't help you. Lyrica said as she held Shiro's hand. I've made up my mind. I'm going to leave Asharia for a while. I'll be traveling around with Asher and the others that you teleported here. They seem like nice folk, and an adventure with them might help me clear my mind too. I don't know when I'll come back, but when I do, I want to be strong enough so that I can contest against queens and even beings like the person who took away my family. And don't worry, I'll keep myself safe with plenty of life-saving talismans and items. Lyrica smiled as she stood up and walked towards the door. Hearing all of this, Shiro's gaze panicked as she grabbed her sleeve. Even with life-saving talismans and items, there are still things that can kill you by ignoring them. Closing her eyes, Lyrica took a deep breath and kept walking. She was afraid that if she hesitated now, she might not be able to leave. Watching Lyrica leave without turning back, Shiro reached out in desperation but wasn't able to grab Lyrica's arm. Looking at Nantion with pleading eyes, Shiro felt her heart sink when Nantion shook his head. Lyrica has made her choice. It would be selfish of us to restrain her. Furrowing her brows, Shiro could only watch silently as Lyrica left the med bay. Making sure that everything was packed up, Lyrica glanced up at the center tower of Asharia and sighed. She didn't want to leave, but this incident had made it clear for her. She had to be strong to protect her happiness. Her heart felt crushed by the news, but during the short time she's been with her mom, she knew that she wouldn't want her to break down and mourn her death. She had to have the courage to stand up and face the future with determination. Plus, this incident had made it clear to her. When they place all of their burdens on Shiro, even her mental state will break. If one was to look at it from a different angle, they could say that they were the cause of Shiro's pain. I'll miss you, Madison said as she was seeing Lyrica off. And me too. I want to help Shiro, but I'm too weak right now. Lyrica smiled as Madison hugged her. Just remember that we're always here for you. Shiro can't say anything right now, but I'm sure she feels the same. I know. I'll be back before you know it, haha. I just hope there is still a spot open for me when I get back. Lyrica smiled as Madison nodded her head. Don't be silly. There is always a spot for you. Walking into the teleport hall, Lyrica could see Asher and the others waiting for her patiently. Thanks for waiting. Lyrica smiled as Asher nodded his head. It's all right. We should be the ones thanking you instead. Asher replied since Lyrica provided them with a lot of help along with joining their party for a while. Helion had made them all new sets of armor and weapons while Ian gave Nithis some tips. After a bit of research, they realized that the armor made by Helion was essentially priceless. They also got a meal from Ian, but they'd rather not talk about that. Walking towards the portal, Lyrica looked back at the tower one last time before stepping forwards with determination. It's been a few weeks since Lyrica had left Asharia. During this time, Shiro hadn't been able to sleep at all. She refused to let me out of her sight, and whenever I did, she would always panic. It seems like she needs at least one person with her at all times since she seemed to stabilize a little when Sylvia was with her. We've been forced to put her to sleep manually since she refused to rest, but every time she woke up, it would always be a panic attack. I suppose it's a blessing that the backlash from firing the weapon couldn't be felt by her anymore since she doesn't have a reaction unless she makes large movements. Sylvia is still developing a way for us to heal Shiro's body since the backlash doesn't seem like it'll be ending anytime soon. There hasn't been any news from the gods either, but I guess it could be that the system was restricting them after Hemera and Gaia interfered last time when the Watcher arrived. Regardless, our goal was to help Shiro recover her body so she could at least walk around. We know that it will take time for her to recover, but staying in the med bay wasn't the right choice. If she continues to be cooped up like this, we won't be able to make any progress. Ian, Lysandra, and everyone else in the party had visited Shiro a few times during this period, and they kept her company when they could. After learning about the full story, each of them seemed determined to become stronger and more reliable so that Shiro didn't need to take all of this burden by herself. Madison took the Demon Legion out on more excursions to clear out dangerous mountains so that people wandering the world could possibly have an easier time. Helion was helping her by providing more equipment to the demons, while simultaneously trying to find new recipes to contend against strange attacks such as the word magic that we experienced that day. Aram was maintaining most of the magic in the city to make sure that everything was working properly. Thankfully, Shiro had automated most of the things just in case she ran out of mana, so the portals were still functional. However, things have become slower since Isilia's anchor crystal had shattered to pieces. We had to place more burden on Madison's anchor, so the second city was lacking a little, but Aram balanced things out by living there. With her providing mana and support to the second city, it was able to hang on without many problems. Estrella was very frustrated. She had left Shiro alone during the battle since her void powers were useless against the relic, but she wasn't able to be by her side when the Watchman appeared. She started to train her own legion of spirits that leveled up similar to her, so they had to go out and hunt often to get EXP. Estrella had also told us that despite having her links fried for the time being, Nimue, Atesh and Azul were safe for now since she could still sense their auras in Shiro. They were just in a sort of stasis for now, so when Shiro recovers, they should be able to reappear. Shinyu hasn't done much in terms of his guild since there wasn't much need for their strength, so they were just training. Their main goal was to attack priority targets of enemy queens, so it wasn't the right time for them to make a move just yet. Ian and Lysandra were training in their own ways, but I've noticed that Lysandra would have moments where she seemed to be struggling. I don't know if it's due to Shiro almost falling, but the color of her wings told us that she was barely hanging in the middle. We did do a checkup with the help of Sylvia, but everything seemed normal, which was concerning. On a side note, Keiko did reach Tier 6, which was much-needed good news to everyone. Koji and Mio wanted to visit, but Shiro was afraid of facing them in this condition since the moment I mentioned it, her body would tense up. It seemed like she didn't want her parents to see her in this state, which was unfortunate since both Koji and Mio were heartbroken since they only visited when she was sleeping. Seeing their daughter's condition, Koji and Mio were furious. Koji seemed to have taken a hard hit, since he was also the one who put ascending to Tier 6 on hold since he couldn't find the inspiration. But with his daughter being in danger, and he wasn't able to do anything, it seemed to have lit a spark in his heart since he immediately resumed his training. Mio did the same, but she went somewhere else. She gave us a talisman to send a message to her if anything happened, but it seems like she was going back to Reapers. It might be because she was a Reaper that her Tier 6 had a different requirement. Glancing towards Shiro, who was holding my sleeve, I could see that she seemed tired, but she forced herself to stay awake. It's been harder to force her to sleep since if we don't do it properly, she would harm herself just to stay awake. There wasn't much I could say to her since if I spoke about how everyone was doing, she might feel depressed about her current situation. For now, I'll keep her company to the best of my abilities. Are you hungry? I asked since it's been a few hours since her last meal. Hearing my question, Shiro shook her head for a moment, but eventually nodded. All right, I'll see if Ian can make you something quick. Sending a message to Ian, I asked if she could make a light meal for Shiro. Her response was simple and quick. Okay. After a few minutes, Ian was already at the door with a simple meal of rice congee and a few light sides. Helping Shiro sit up, Ian slowly fed Shiro since it was painful for her to move her body. Opening her mouth, I could see that Shiro wanted to apologize due to her expression, and Ian was the same since she shook her head. It's all right, Mom. You took care of me before, so it's only natural that I do the same for you. Just take your time, all right. Ian smiled as she lightly hugged Shiro, not wanting to hurt her body. Glancing down, Shiro forced a smile and nodded. After eating the meal, we helped Shiro lay back down as Ian left with the trays. After a while, I managed to cast a sleep spell on Shiro, so she was able to finally get some rest. Unfortunately, even in her sleep, she seemed to be in pain. Her grip on my sleeve would tighten occasionally, as if afraid that I would leave. Seeing the tears that rolled down her face, I couldn't help but sigh heavily and wipe them away. I wondered if this was a punishment for her going against fate so often. She received an insight of the future back when she first met Nyx and changed her fate by creating the anchor. The second time she used Chronos' power to turn back time and send a vision, but this resulted in her developing a trauma and Icilia being taken along with Edvamar. The trade-off was that everyone else is now alive. You even pushed yourself to the point of breaking by stacking berserk skills when your body was suffering from the initial backlash too. I guess there is a limit to how crazy you can be at times. Closing my eyes, I decided to rest for a few minutes before doing more work. I need to keep everything running so that when Shiro recovers, everything would be ready for her grand comeback. I'll help the army develop their training some more by mixing the martial arts that the sect teaches so that they're more effective in matches. I can't do much about the weapons, but we can use the simulations to help them develop combat experience. I wonder if there will be more system events like this one. Hopefully none at this scale, but if there are some, we might want to think about participating in one or two of them with Madison so we don't fall behind. We still need to set down one or two anchors since there are still plenty of people roaming in the world. We can't make another floating city, but I suppose a normal city should be fine for now. We'll convert it when Shiro comes back. Now that Shiro's taken out of the picture for a while, it seems like most of our plans revolved around her. Heis. Shaking my head, I started changing some of the training schedules for the military. I suppose I have to take over your spot when it comes to tormenting them. Come back soon. That night Shiro had a familiar dream. She was laying on her bed, and everyone was around her. Nantion and Edvamar were in the room next to them as a figure appeared. She couldn't do anything as she watched the two of them get smashed around like sandbags. The strangeness of his technique and the absolute dominance he showed was engraved into Shiro's mind. Watching her come towards the room, Shiro would fight back, but after having the same dream over and over again, she didn't do anything anymore. She just wanted the dream to be over. She didn't know how many times it's been now. How many times she watched Isilia get captured and taken away from her. Are you giving up? A faint voice echoed as Shiro hesitated, but just blocked out all the sound and closed her eyes, hugging her knees. She just wanted to forget about everything, but every time she closed her eyes, she would be brought back to this moment. It haunted her in her dreams as well as in real life. There would be moments where a simple flicker of a shadow would send a wave of panic through her heart, as it would almost resemble the figure of the watchman. She knew that she was in a slump. She found it laughable, but there was a barrier that she couldn't cross. Even if she wanted to get past it, the smallest reminder would cause her to hyperventilate and go into a panic attack. Everything she found to be harmless seemed so scary now. She found it scary to leave the med bay. She found it scary to watch people leave. She found it scary to be alone without anyone. There was no reaction from Nimue, Izul, and Adi, and she was afraid to find out what had happened to them. There were so many things she was afraid of now. She just wanted time to stop so that she didn't need to keep thinking about these things. There have been times where she's looked down at her hands and felt depressed. She had so much power, but when it mattered the most, she couldn't do anything, forcing herself to wake up again. Shiro kept her eyes closed as she braced her heart. Even the simple task of waking up was scary for her. She didn't want to see herself alone in the med bay when she woke up, so she often waited for even the smallest hint that a person was near her before opening her eyes. A simple tap of a screen, the sound of breathing, a faint mutter, or even just the rustle of clothing. She desperately hoped for even a small hint when she woke up so that she could open her eyes with a peace of mind. Each time she woke up, she would see Nantion by her side greeting her with a soft smile. He would occasionally talk to her, but most of the time would let her relax at her own pace. Shiro knew that he was probably helping out with Acharya, but there wasn't anything she could do right now. Even if she recovered physically, she didn't know if she'd be able to leave this room. She knew that everyone was trying hard while she was injured, but she simply couldn't control herself. There was always this crushing fear that gripped her mind whenever she was reminded of that day. It would cause her to be paralyzed from head to toe, sometimes even hindering her breathing. Ian visits as often as possible. She tried to bring Lysandra, but Shiro shook seeing the black wings on her back. Remembering that she had almost lost everything, and not just Isilia, because she had almost become a fallen, Shiro felt afraid to fight. She was afraid that she might lose control and her name tag would turn completely black and remove all hope of ever keeping her treasured people safe. The most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovelworld.com. Shiro knew that she hurt Lysandra deeply, but her body didn't seem to listen to her. She reprimanded herself time and time again, but she couldn't remove her fear of becoming fallen, which resulted in Lysandra not even being able to come into contact with her. Sylvia also visited often. Most times she would be right after Ian to do a regular checkup. She had been using healing spells every day, with some proving to be more helpful than others in terms of healing her physical body. Today's checkup was no different as Shiro laid on the bed, almost expressionless. She's mentally fatigued. She was tormented regardless of what she did. When she slept, she'll have nightmares. When she was awake, she might have a panic attack. Even with them forcing her to sleep, she didn't look any better. There were bags under her eyes, and her gaze was lacking the fighting spirit she had previously. She looked awful. Thankfully, Ian helped clean her with a towel, since having Nantion do it would be a little inappropriate. However, he wouldn't be far since Shiro had to keep him within her sights, or else she'll start panicking. Keeping her eyes on Nantion, Shiro wondered how long it's been now. The days just seemed to blend together since her sleeping pattern has completely broken apart. But no matter what day it was, the settings seemed the same. She was on the bed. Nantion was next to her doing work on the tablet. It was the only thing that didn't change, and it calmed her. Lyrica had left after receiving the news of her parents' death. Shiro didn't blame her. She failed at keeping Lyrica's parents safe, so it was natural for her to want to obtain power so that she could protect them herself. Shiro wanted to do the same, but just the mere thoughts of fighting the watchman again caused her hands to shake. If she provoked him, would he take someone else from her? Looking down at Shiro, Nantion was concerned about her complexion. Despite forcing her to sleep, she was looking more haggard with each passing day, and it seems like she wasn't getting the rest needed in her sleep either. The time she slept was being reduced with each day, and sometimes it was even as short as 30 minutes. They would now consider it lucky if she could sleep for more than 2 hours. It has already been 3 weeks since Lyrica had left. Things have been progressing at a smooth pace, and thankfully, there doesn't seem to be any signs of a new event soon. Madison had been keeping an eye out, and while all the queens are improving their military, none of them have a secure target for now, so they could assume that there aren't any events happening soon, which caused him to sigh in relief. The cure to Shiro's condition was almost done too. Thanks to her initial backlash stopping, progress had increased quickly, but there were some lasting effects that obstructed the healing process. Sylvia reassured Nantion that it would disappear soon, but it still didn't lessen his worry. However, they were able to heal Shiro's throat for now since it wasn't damaged too harshly. But even with her throat healed, Shiro was quiet. She didn't speak often, and when asked a question, would normally nod or shake her head. Kiyomi had also found out what happened to Shiro and felt devastated. She was already frustrated at not being able to help during the first event, so kept herself in seclusion with outside contact being cut off. She had the thought that if it was Shiro, nothing would go wrong since it was her amazing big sis after all. She was able to create miracles and complete tasks that others can't even dream of completing, so she trained without worry. She had to admit that there were moments where she would laze around, but the result was quite good. When she came out of seclusion, she was excited to see what kind of relic that Shiro had recovered, so she asked them about it immediately. Naturally, she broke down into tears when she heard that Shiro couldn't even leave her room due to the trauma that she had developed. While her sister was suffering, she was actually lazing around in seclusion without giving a crap about what was happening. She understood that she had treated Shiro as this undefeatable figure that not even the gods could put down, but the truth was that behind all of that was still just a single girl. Her older sister, annoyed that she had put off all her work while her sister was suffering. Kiyomi went into seclusion for real with Li Jian, the sect master of the hidden sect, and Nantion's adoptive father. Since he was the most experienced when it came to martial arts, she sought his tutelage as Koji was busy with other tasks. Closing his eyes, Nantion realized that everyone in the party was now either doing everything they could to help Shiro or training themselves to the limit so that they won't have to give all the work to her. No one was idle anymore, even if the development of the plan seemed slow. Once Shiro returned, everyone would jump into gear, ready to fight with the queens. But that was only if she returned. This should hopefully fix her body to the point where she won't have any trouble walking around. I'm not sure about her mana and divine energy, but it should recover soon. I'll still do some research on it though. Sylvia sighed as she handed Nantion a spell talisman with a magic circle painted on the surface. Looking at the complexity, he understood that performing this kind of magic circle live would be a little risky, hence why she painted it on a talisman instead. Thanks. Nantion smiled as Sylvia nodded her head. Don't worry about it. Just keep her company, okay? Sylvia smiled as she gave Shiro a hug before leaving the room. Watching Sylvia leave, Shiro eventually glanced towards Nantion, who was preparing to use the talisman. Emin, did you need something? Nantion smiled, seeing Shiro glance towards him. Shaking her head, Shiro laid down so that he could use the spell a little easier. Pushing mana into the talisman, a complicated magic array materialized around Shiro, as stacks upon stacks of Tier 5 magic circles could be seen flickering with a soft glow. A green tether of energy flowed into Shiro's body as the fractures caused by the system backlash started to stitch back together. Sighing in relief, Nantion was glad that most of her physical injuries have now been healed. He wasn't sure about the extent of damage to her soul, but it seemed like it has also been fixed since she would space out, as though she was looking at her stat page. But since she hasn't said anything, he wouldn't say anything either. How are you feeling? Does it still hurt anywhere? Nantion asked as the magic array faded away. Sitting up, Shiro glanced down at her hands before shaking her head. Opening her mouth, she hesitated for a moment, but eventually said nothing and laid back down on the bed. Looking at Nantion, who had resumed his work on the tablet, Shiro's gaze flickered. Are you not disappointed with me? She asked with a coarse voice. Not at all. What makes you think that I'm disappointed? Nantion replied with a soft smile. Feeling her grip tighten on his teeth, he waited patiently for her response. Because everyone's trying their best, and I'm here not being able to leave. Mom, Dad, Madison, Lyrica, and everyone else must be fed up with me. After the first time I haven't seen Mom at all. Shiro spoke slowly as Nantion could tell that she was nervous. I don't think they're disappointed in you per se. They're more disappointed in themselves since they left everything to you. If we were more useful, we could have split the burden. Nantion shook his head. Don't worry about it too much. You've overworked yourself plenty already. Take this time to rest. He smiled. Feeling Nantion's hand on her head, Shiro closed her eyes. I can't get in touch with Nimue, Izul, or Addy. Do you think they've left me too? She asked. They haven't left. They're just in a stasis right now. Once your body has recovered, they'll come back. I'm sure of it. Hearing this, Shiro opened her eyes and looked at the door connecting this room to the corridor. She wanted to at least try to leave, but her body seemed to refuse the thought of approaching that door, even though she was now healed. Taking her eyes off the door, she looked at Nantion. Are you going to use that sleep spell on me again? In a few hours, yes. You find it hard to sleep manually now, don't you? Nantion replied, setting his tablet aside. He was happy that she finally started to talk, so it would be rude of him not to give her his full attention. I do, but it's scarier when I sleep. When I dream, it's always the same. Shiro replied as guilt and fear filled her heart. I'll ask my subordinates to do some research, okay? We'll see if there are any spells to control your dream. That way you can have a good night's sleep. Nantion smiled as Shiro furrowed her brows. I don't want others to use it. If they do, that means they'll see my dreams. Would you mind if I do it then? Nantion asked as Shiro paused for a moment before nodding. She didn't want him to see her state every time the watchman appeared in her mind. Are you upset? No, I'm not. If you don't want me to see, then I won't. I'll respect your decision. Nantion chuckled. Maybe in the future then. I think as long as you're here when I wake up, I'll be fine. Shiro said as she closed her eyes. Don't worry. I'll be here when you wake up. I won't leave. Nantion smiled as Shiro nodded her head and tried to sleep naturally for the first time ever since they returned from the fight. It was a familiar scene, but this time it was like she was someone else watching through a window, her own pitiful silhouette hugging her knees, averting her gaze from what was happening in front of her. Pitiful, isn't it? A voice called out as Shiro glanced to her right and saw a mirror that seemed to reflect herself. Well, her reflection asked as Shiro nodded her head. It is pitiful. Shiro glanced back to the scene and pressed her hand against the window. Aren't you going to change that then? Her reflection asked, but Shiro had no reaction. She could no longer hear her reflection, and her attention was solely focused on her figure on the bed, which seemed smaller than ever. Clicking her tongue, the reflection flickered before returning back to a normal reflection. Walking through the path between the realms, Mio had a cold expression as she was furious. As much as she wanted to be with her daughter right now, she had more important matters. She needed to find Hades and find out why such a being was even allowed to come down here at this time. Even if he received special permission from the system, it was still ridiculous. Plus, as the god of the underworld, he should have a way to reclaim Isilia's soul. And since she was coming back here, she figured that she might as well ascend to tier 6 anyways. It'll take a while though. Seeing the exit, Mio was about to step through when she noticed her parents waiting by the door. I knew you were going to come back after seeing what had happened. Knowing your personality, you won't sit still if Shiro was harmed. Kaluz narrowed his eyes. You were waiting for me? Mio furrowed her brows. MN, you might not want to go in there right now. Hades is not pleased at all. He just had a fight, and he is seething right now. Citral cautioned as Mio frowned. Who did he fight? Mio asked as Kaluz massaged his brow. He fought the one known as the Watchman. He launched an attack on him with the combined efforts of Nyx, who had her daughter harmed, and Tartarus, who was also displeased by his actions. Unfortunately, the Watchman received help from both the system and 2 gods, which forced Nyx, Hades, and Tartarus to retreat. They're tending to their wounds right now, but Hades is a bit volatile, so you might want to wait. Kaluz explained. I see, but I still want to talk to him. Hearing this, Kaluz was about to say something when divine energy swept over the energy. Let her in. Hades' voice rang out as Mio could immediately sense that he was annoyed since lacked the upbeat tone he usually spoke with. Stepping through the portal despite the concerned looks of her father and mother, Mio tilted her head back as she looked at the towering figure of Hades who sat on his throne. His body was wrapped in a black armor as black shadows writhed around him. A crown made from black energy hovered above his head as fractures could be seen around his torso area. If you're here to ask if I can kill the Watchman or not, I'm afraid I can't do anything right now. He's being protected, and if it's about helping Shiro, I can't do much either. This is a fear she has to overcome. Hades sighed. I know. She has trustworthy friends by her side, so I believe that my daughter will overcome this challenge with their help. As for me, I am here to ask that you to help me in a different matter. I wish to become the next head of the Reaper household. Mio kneeled as Hades narrowed his eyes. So you wish to take your parents' place and become my apostle? Hades asked. Yes. Mio nodded with determination. I'm afraid I have to say no to your request. Hearing this, Mio paused in surprise before looking up to see that Hades had reverted back to his usual form. Since you're Shiro's mother, I can't possibly make you my subordinate. If I did, I'm pretty sure I won't be able to sit down for a while. So rather than making you my subordinate, I am willing to offer you a different task. Hades grinned as he took a deep breath. What do you think about trying to become a god? Become a god? Mio asked with mild surprise as Hades nodded his head. Yup, I'm offering you a chance to become a god. I'm not sure what kind of divinity you'll develop, but the path to becoming a god is hard. There is a chance of death, but with me as your guarantor, you'll have one chance where there is no risk of you dying for good. Hades smiled as Mio furrowed her brows before nodding. If this can help Shiro in the long run, then so be it. Hearing this, Hades grinned. Perfect. Let me explain to you what a god exactly is in the definition of the system rather than the biblical god. You see, when the system classes you as a god per se, it means that you've reached a certain amount of power within a single concept. That is your divinity. Children of gods are born innately with a divinity that branches from their parents, but there is a problem with that. You see, the children of gods are not able to truly get a divinity they want. They're born with it, and they don't get to choose. The normal way to become a god is to first reach level 1000 where you touch the threshold of demigod. It is at this stage that you begin cultivating your divinity, and the levels become irrelevant. There is no level 1001. The cap is 1000 and beyond. That is the quality of your divinity along with the faith that you receive. We Greek gods already have a rich history, so we passively gain faith through the stories that you mortals have told. For new generations like you, you'll need to create temples, perform miracles, and so on, which Shiro has done amazingly so far. But that is the long road. While it's the most common, it takes a while for you to be truly powerful against other gods. Hades sat down and crossed his legs. Hence why my proposition is for you to ascend the path of divinity in the Hall of Divine. Hall of Divine. Yes, you can call that a hub area for gods. We see detestable faces there every day, so we don't like to visit much. Funnily enough, Shiro already has her own little area there. It's small, but the killing intent most can sense is pretty astounding. Normally, the path of divinity is what most gods use to refine their divinity to the next level. I want you to go there without a divinity and forcefully refine it to the next stage. With my power, the moment there is danger, I can drag you out. But that is a one-off. Once you complete the path of divinity, you'll be raised to demigod status, and to reach god status, you'll need to cultivate like everyone else, but it should be easy enough. Surely it can't be that easy. If it was, plenty of gods would have tried to make more demigods. Mio furrowed her brows. Yes, but there is a high chance of failure. Since you have no inherent divine energy and no feeling of what divinity feels like, refining it is quite difficult. Plus, the person who sends you in there, in this case me, will suffer two backlashes. First is the system backlash, since I am sending you to the Hall of Divine to attend this test. The second is divinity backlash, since I'm using a portal of my divinity to help you bluff your way into the test. Most gods are a little selfish, so they don't risk their hard-earned divinity for a low chance of a demigod. At this stage, individual power is important, so if the god weakens themselves, their records will be affected. Temples being destroyed, stories being forgotten, and so on. Hades explained with a smile. Wouldn't that put a target on you? Mio asked. Oh, of course, but that's only if they find out it's me. So when you do this, try not to give them any clues and say my name, okay? Hades chuckled as Mio nodded. Perfect. In that case, then I'll start the preparations. Time flows a bit differently in the path of divinity, so I'm wishing that your mind can tolerate the passage of time. Mortals who only live for a split instance in the grand scheme of things find it hard to comprehend such a long passage of time after all. Hades chuckled as he stood up. Taking a deep breath, Mio thought back to Shiro's figure in the med bay and closed her eyes. I'm ready, Mio said as she opened her eyes. For Shiro, who had endured an unknown amount of pain, this was nothing. Smiling at her determination, Hades opened a portal as the two of them disappeared from the Reaper realm. Looking at the tablet with a frown, Nantion massaged his eyes. According to Madison, there was another event happening, but thankfully, it wasn't as crazy as the Rainbow Relic. The rewards for this event was a high-end Tier 6 subordinate, as well as a hidden title. With the system dubbing it as a high-end Tier 6 subordinate, Nantion could guess it was something along the lines of 800 plus. Probably something stronger than most queens right now. It's a bit annoying, but compared to the danger that a Rainbow Relic brought, this was nothing. Thinking about it for a moment, Nantion decided that they should probably skip out on this event. There's no doubt that more queens will participate in this one, and their main goal was to keep everything running. Teleporting the city was a bit difficult now that Isilia's anchor is gone, so they didn't have their most powerful escape option. Madison, alright, I'll continue leveling up with the rest of the Demon Legion. How is she, by the way? Is she looking a bit better or the same as usual? Nantion, she's talking a bit more now. She understands her problem, so it's better than nothing. Madison, I see. I'll come visit after I finish leveling up a little with the Demon Legion. Nantion, see you soon then. Closing the chat tab, Nantion glanced at Shiro, who was having some decent rest, and smiled. Thankfully, after repairing her body, she was able to rest with more consistency, but there was still a chance that she would wake up in a cold sweat due to the nightmares. Nantion understood that forcefully putting her to sleep at this point was bad, even if she was awake for a long time. It was best to let her rest on her own, since she too understands that she needs rest. The one thing that didn't change was that she continued to keep a tight grip on his sleeve whenever she slept, in fear of not seeing him when she woke up. Looking back at his tablet, Nantion checked up on what Ian and Lysandra were doing. Lysandra's pains were fading away, so she could venture out for longer periods of time without being in fear of freezing up due to the pain. If she was to pause during combat, it could prove to be fatal, hence why Ian was with her most of the time. Ian had decided to resume her search for the remaining fragments with the help of Chun Yu's assassin guild. While they were primarily used for assassination, their information gathering was by no means inferior. They had already helped her discover a few signs of potential fragments and locations for one of them. With Ian making her way to reaching Tier 6, Sylvia, Aram, Chinyu, and Helion weren't too far behind either as they progressed in their own ways. Helion was making more and more armor each day using all of the materials that Shiro had sent him during her travels, including the strange marble that was highly resistant to corrosion and rot attacks that would destroy armor in an instant. With Asharia constantly flying through the sky with camouflage activated, they would pass by a few makeshift settlements and help out. As much as they wanted to bring them onto the city, they couldn't, since they couldn't make any more houses and Asharia was barely hanging on to begin with. When they pass a settlement, Sylvia will take some healers with her to treat them, while Nantion had a few merchants give them some rations. Of course, there were a few settlements that tried to do things the primitive way by the victor taking all, and the outcome was naturally their destruction. Those that didn't raise their hand would get help. Feeling some movement next to him, Nantion stopped thinking about what happened and focused on Shiro. Seeing her open her eyes slowly and look up at him, he smiled. Good morning. Amen. Good morning. I saw that the system has started another event. Is Madison going to participate in it? Shiro asked hesitantly, as Nantion shook his head. Don't worry, she's leveling up with her subordinates. Nantion smiled as Shiro sighed in relief. Laying on the bed, she thought about it for a moment before opening her mouth. I'm going to say something, and will you promise that you won't laugh at me? She asked as Nantion nodded. I won't, don't worry. Do you need my help? No. Amen, maybe a little. I want to try to leave this room. Taking a few breaths, Shiro sat on the edge of her bed. Take your time, no need to rush. Nantion smiled as Shiro nodded her head. Stepping out of her bed for the first time, Shiro could already feel her heart pounding as she looked towards the door. Tightening her grip on Nantion's sleeve, she took a step forward. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. With each step, her heart seemed to pound louder as there was a ringing sound in her ears. Her mind seemed to become foggy as her surroundings twisted. Biting her lips, Shiro squeezed her eyes shut before taking another step forward. Seeing Shiro struggle with walking towards the door, Nantion didn't say anything and only watched silently while urging her on in his heart. Opening her eyes again, Shiro froze up in a panic as the shadows seemed to form the image of the watchman behind the door. Her breathing halted as her muscles tensed up. Despite wanting to take another step forward, she found her body refusing to budge. Gritting her teeth, Shiro sighed in defeat as she took a step back. Finally being able to breathe again, Shiro tightened her grip on Nantion's sleeve. Don't think about it too much. This is just the first attempt. Nantion reassured with a smile as Shiro nodded her head and made her way back on the bed. Sitting down with one hand hugging both her knees and the other gripped on Nantion's sleeve, Shiro sat in silence. She opened her mouth a few times, but didn't say anything. Letting her think for a moment, Nantion continued to work. Sorry. Shiro apologized as Nantion glanced over. Why are you apologizing? He asked with a raised eyebrow. Well, I didn't manage to get past the door. Shiro replied softly as she peeked up at him to see his expression. Seeing him smiled softly, Shiro watched as he set down the tablet. There's nothing that you should be apologizing about. It's not like stopping here means that you've failed or that you've given up. You have plenty of time to try your best. I won't be disappointed no matter what you choose to do. Nantion chuckled. So even if I give up, you won't be disappointed? Shiro asked. Yes, because I know you won't give up. You just need time. That's my faith in you as a person. You are someone who challenges the impossible. You gather gods to your side and make them your allies while others dread your presence. This is nothing but a short stop for you to rest. You make me sound better than I already am. Shiro muttered, glancing down at the ripples on the bed sheet. That's only because you think you're not that good. Overcoming this lies in your mindset. Even if it takes years, I'll be here every step of the way. Of course, only if you permit me. Nantion chuckled. Emin, you're asking for consent now. Shiro laughed softly, distracting herself from the fact that she sucked at you dumb bed to her fears. Well, if I didn't, I'd just annoy you, no? Nantion chuckled. That's true. I should have had my dad keep a close eye on you so you didn't get kidnapped. Shiro nodded while resting her head on her arm. Well, if you did, things would be very different now, wouldn't they? True. Nodding her head, Shiro laid down properly on the bed as she glanced up at Nantion. Has Nyx and the other gods contracted you yet? I haven't heard anything from them. Shiro asked. She was able to see her system again, and it was quite a shock to see all of the notifications, with most of them being damage dealt to her body. The messages from the gods seemed to have cut off after she was injured after the fight with the Watchmen, so she wasn't sure about what they thought. I haven't heard anything from them either. There's the possibility that it's just the system acting up since we did try to go against it. I'd say we give it a while to see how it reacts. Nantion smiled as Shiro nodded her head. Looking up at the ceiling, she glanced at the damage reports. Her soul was mostly repaired, hence why she was able to see and touch, but it was still damaged due to the system backlash. Her body was incapable of using mana or divine energy right now, and there seemed to be a title, or rather, debuff placed on her body. Tainted Shell. After barely escaping the fate of becoming fallen, your body and soul is now more prone to corruptive powers. Chances of resisting fallen transformation, minus 10%. It was a permanent debuff/title that hindered her, but she wasn't surprised. In that moment of losing Isilia, she desperately wanted power to avoid that fate, and this desire had almost pulled her over the edge. Had it not been for Gaia in the final moments, she would just be a husk of herself. Aside from Tainted Shell, there were two more things that caught her eye, one of which is the skill she received from using extraction on Jasmine, which robbed her of her senses. Soul Siphon. You lock your gaze on your opponent's soul and destroy it from within. The stronger your opponent, the harder it is to keep your eye on their soul. Should you take your eyes off before the process is finished, it'll slowly heal back the damage. Those with resistances can contest against this skill to delay the effects. Cost: 20% of mana initial cost. 1% per second after the initial cost. Duration: not applicable. Cooldown: 1 day per soul. The second thing that caught her eye was the title she received on the day she fired the weapon. Realm Breaker. Your attack has penetrated the barrier between realms. Whenever you attack, you can imbue your attack with a small amount of divine energy in order to redirect the energy of the barrier collapsing onto their body. Unless they have resistances against dimensional energies, they cannot block this damage. Aside from this, her stats have also increased since she was level 760, but she couldn't help but find her stat page a little laughable. Despite the huge numbers and a myriad of skills, she still lost without being able to do much. Suddenly, Nantion flickered her forehead. Ow, what was that for? Shiro furrowed her brows and rubbed her forehead while glancing up at Nantion, who chuckled. You have the same expression whenever you think about yourself in a self-depreciative manner. Nantion replied as Shiro lightly rubbed her forehead. And how would you know that? Well, I've seen it quite often now. Nantion shrugged. He had seen the same expression time and time again, and each time he saw it, he felt his heart being pierced, since Shiro would always continue to spiral down once it started. Now that she had finally started to look forward, he couldn't let her spiral down again. He decided to take a gamble, and thankfully it paid off, since it didn't annoy her further, and that she was actually comfortable with speaking casually now. As if finally seeing a hint of the end of the tunnel, Nantion felt happier than ever in his heart. He just had to continue at this pace, and sooner or later, she'll be able to recover, and he'll be able to see Shiro at her best again. Bullying a patient. What if I become depressed? Shiro pouted while pulling the cover over her head. If you become depressed because of my flick, I suppose I'll have to take responsibility to help you then. Nantion smiled. And how would you even do that? Good question. How would I do that? Nantion joked, as it was good to help Shiro think about other things for now. And you asked the patient? You have no talent for being a therapist or doctor, Shiro replied. Under the cover, there was a small smile on her face as her gaze softened. Closing them, she decided to rest now. She'll try again after she wakes up. Well, I'm not exactly a doctor type to begin with. Hearing no response for a while, Nantion realized that she must have slept and pulled down the cover a little so that she could sleep comfortably. Brushing the hair off her face, he wished that she had a pleasant dream instead of a nightmare before resuming his work on the tablet. It's been 2 months since we came back from space. Isilia and Edvamar are gone. Shiro was suffering from trauma. Lysandra was venturing out with Een in order to help her find the fragments needed to help Een level up, and Lyrica had left the city in order to get stronger so that she could avenge her parents' deaths. During that fight against the Watchmen, neither me nor Lysandra could do anything as we watched helplessly. Even though Shiro blamed herself the most, I knew that she tried her best while me and Lysandra couldn't even lift a finger. Thinking back to what had happened, anger flared in my heart. Hiya! Twisting my body, I pictured the face of the Watchman on the monster I was facing and ripped through its flesh. Finding the ribs, I pried them open and tore his body in half. Cracking my neck, I flicked off the blood on my hands while taking deep breaths to calm myself. I knew that I was angrier at myself more than I was at the Watchman. Angry at my own uselessness. Your Highness, we've cleared out this room. I think there is one chamber left, and the nest will be cleared out, Felsha reported as I nodded my head. She was the one who took control of the demons for a while when the new age started, and naturally, I punished her accordingly. All right, tell everyone to get ready. We'll charge in and finish everything in one go, I ordered. Watching Felsha deliver the message to the rest of the demons, I sighed and glanced up at the ceiling. I thought back to the state of Shiro and closed my eyes. The sight of her trembling figure with eyes that have lost their lustre was clear in my mind. We had actually hid behind her shadow and let her take everything on herself. All of our talks of being useful to her seemed so hollow now that I looked back. We promised that we'll be stronger, but to what extent did we risk ourselves to discover strength like her? I knew that Lyrica must have understood this, hence why she ventured out, to risk her life in order to gain power. I wanted to do the same, but if I leave as well, I wasn't sure how well Shiro would take it. If all of us left one by one when she needed us the most, it'll only harm her more. I couldn't leave. Just the knowledge of me still being around should be helpful for her. Even as we entered the final chamber of his nest, my mind was still wandering back to the matters in the city, but it was fine since I was undefeatable in this nest. Compared to these monsters, I was their greatest fear. I peeled the scales off the monster's skin, tore his bones out, and gouged out his eyes. To me, he was incredibly weak, and I knew this is how the Watchman felt when he faced off against us. Similar to how I was able to stop the monster from fighting back at all, the Watchman did the same. I want to get stronger. I wanted to get stronger so I won't be like this monster. Despite being the strongest in his nest, some random person like me could appear and rip him to pieces. I wanted to be strong so that the same situation wouldn't happen anymore. After killing the monster, I had the demons harvest everything from the nest and make our way back to the city. Felsha and Asphil noticed that I was slightly out of it, but they didn't say anything. Once we were back in the city, I had the demons deliver the better materials to Helion so that he could put them to use. Arriving at his workshop, I knocked on the door and laid down on the sofa. It had been my comfort spot ever since I returned from space, since the rhythmic sounds of Helion hammering the metal calmed my nerves. You seem to have a lot on your mind today, Helion called out to me with a smile as I nodded my head. Amen, a little. Same as usual? He asked. He knew that I was stressed out about getting strength, but I couldn't leave. Maybe you should talk to Shiro about it. I heard from Sylvia and Nantion that she seemed to be making stable improvements, Helion suggested with a smile as I sat up in surprise. After not hearing any news of improvement for a while, this was a surprise to be sure. What happened? I asked, wanting to know more. Apparently she's starting to talk more now, though she's only comfortable with talking to Nantion. I heard from him that she actively tried to leave the med bay today, but failed. Shiro did say that she'll try again tomorrow. Hearing this, I sighed in relief and leaned back. That's good, I muttered. Now that Shiro is recovering, maybe you can talk to her more to see how she is. Perhaps you might be able to ask her if you can leave for a short journey, Helion suggested. No, if I do that she might be burdened, which could have negative effects. She's just started recovering, so I don't want to hit her with news of me wanting to leave. I replied with a frown. I know. I'm saying that you should talk to her after some time. Normally, Shiro wouldn't mind you venturing out, so I was thinking that you assess her current mental state by interacting with her more. Hearing this, I thought for a moment before nodding her head. All right, I'll talk to her for a bit to see how she is. I continued to talk to Helion for a bit before returning to my room and slept till morning. Once I woke up, I immediately made my way to the med bay. Nantion had been staying next to Shiro and hadn't left since. Even when she slept, he continued to stay next to her since he didn't want the same thing that happened on the first day to happen again. That day, he had left for a short break, and when he returned, he saw Shiro breaking down in a corner. He knew that her mental state was fragile right now, so he accompanied her. Turning the corner, I could already see the doors to the med bay. To my surprise, I could see Shiro in front of the door with an expression of absolute fear. Her chest moved up and down rapidly as I knew she was hyperventilating. Nantion stood next to her with a face of concern while she kept a tight grip on his shirt. Hiding myself, I observed silently while praying in my mind. I wanted her to overcome this barrier. I wished that I could see her just reach out and push that set of doors apart. Come on, I thought in my mind. However, 20 minutes passed, and Shiro wasn't able to take a single step forward. Taking a step back with a downcast expression, Shiro walked back to the bed while Nantion comforted her with a small smile. After seeing this, I wasn't sure if I should continue with my plan. She must be feeling shitty right now. Showing myself to her might just make matters worse. I thought to myself, leaning against the wall for a moment. I thought back to the expression I saw and knew that her mental barrier must be bigger than anything I imagined. After all, this was a woman that didn't even bat an eye to pissing off a whole pantheon of gods. Seeing her figure now, I wouldn't have thought that they were the same person if I didn't know Shiro. The change was quite drastic, but that just showed how much of an impact she had suffered from the Watchman. Feeling my phone vibrate, I glanced down and saw that Nantion had sent me a message. Nantion, I noticed that you were watching a moment ago. Shiro hasn't noticed, so I didn't say anything. You might want to visit a little later, but that's up to you. She's quite down about what just happened, but I also believe some company might help distract her mind right now. Thinking about it for a moment, I decided to come back later since I didn't know how I could react to this situation. I figured that things might be easier once I give her a bit of time to calm herself. Replying to Nantion, I glanced back at the med bay and started walking away. Suddenly, I received a notification. It was a similar format to what Shiro had shown us before, and I knew it was a message from a god. To my dearest descendant, I noticed that you seem to have a bit of trouble, so after some preparation, I am finally able to provide you with a way to get stronger. As your ancestor, I realized that I haven't given you anything to congratulate you on your ascension, so I suppose this will have to do. The system is a bit stingy with the requirements when it comes to messaging you, so this is about all I can say. However, I hope you can forgive me for the delay. From your ancestor, Demon God Macron. Attached to the message was a single item. Invitation to the Demon Realm. Who was that? Shiro asked curiously as she sat down on the bed with a sigh. You noticed them? MN, but I didn't see who it was. I just know that someone was there. Shiro nodded. Is that so? Well, it was Maddie, but it seems like she's busy with something else. Nantion replied. So it was Maddie, huh? What do you think she thought of when she saw me fail to leave? She asked while glancing down at her hands. I'm sure it's nothing bad. I'd wager that she's cheering you on. Nantion smiled, staying silent for a moment. Shiro glanced up and opened her mouth. However, before she said a single word, her eyes flickered for a moment before sighing and let out a small laugh. I'm really desperate right now, Shiro muttered. I can tell. You seem to have wanted to suggest something just now. Nantion nodded his head. MN, I was about to suggest that I suppress my memories so that I could act like this never happened. But that's just running away. Even if I tried, I'd get suspicious. There's simply too much that has happened which is tied to Isilia. The memories would return quickly, and then I'll be back at the beginning. Shiro sighed and glanced up at the ceiling. If I want to fix myself, I can't run away. That is true. Nantion smiled. Pretty inspiring, huh? I might start writing quotes, haha. Shiro joked with a soft laugh as she looked at the door. But I suppose I can try brute forcing it, she said as she aimed her palm at the door. If I just destroy this door that I'm so afraid of and see what's on the other side, do you think my fears will disappear? Shiro asked, thinking about it for a moment. Nantion hesitated before shaking his head. It depends, but I don't think brute forcing it is the best option right now. MN, is that so? Well, you have a point. Shiro shrugged as she hugged her knees. I'll be honest, I don't think things will ever be the same anymore. I don't think I can be as fearless as I was before now that Icilia was taken before me. I'll be honest, I'm dreading the thought of fighting the Watchman again, even if I grow stronger. Shiro chuckled as Nantion closed his eyes. That's true. However, I do believe that there will never be a same you. Things happening around you will change you ever so slightly. Some might bring about a large change. Some might be so small that practically nothing changes at all. But in the end, they combine into the present you. Sometimes you need to take a step back in order to proceed. I think that this taste of fear is the step back that you needed. Nantion hesitated for a moment before speaking his mind. Hearing this, Shiro contemplated silently as her lips eventually curved up into a small smile. Resting her head on her arm, she looked at her left hand that was holding onto his sleeve. Perhaps you're right, but how big of a step back do you think this is? Shiro asked as Nantion chuckled. This is quite a big step back if you ask me. Well, aren't you just sh*t at comforting people, making me feel depressed again? Shiro giggled softly. You certainly don't look depressed right now. I know that face. You're probably thinking about something outrageous, aren't you? Nantion smiled, since it's been a while since he had last seen this expression. Maybe, but even if I'm thinking of something outrageous, I can't do anything right now. Shiro lay down on the bed and closed her eyes. Well, no matter what you choose, I'll be supporting you from the back. Hearing this, Shiro smiled. Finding herself in the same labyrinth, Shiro glanced down at her hand, and she was already shaking from dread. I suppose you are what they call my mental demon. If I don't surpass you, I won't ever get past my fear. Shiro muttered as she looked towards the figure who held a dead corpse of Icilia in his hand. Staying silent, he stared at her with eerie calmness. Nothing. Figures. But I think I've troubled everyone long enough now. She forced a smile as she punched her thigh to stop her leg from shaking. Putting on a brave front, Shiro wanted to confront her demon. If there was someone else seeing this right now, they would think that it was similar to a young cub backed into a corner by a predator. Shiro's defense was filled with gaps, her legs unsteady, her breathing uneven. Her eyes would dart around, but she would force them to look her fear straight in the face. Gritting her teeth, she took the first step forward and punched towards the Watchman. Snapping her eyes open, Shiro panted heavily as cold sweat filled her back. Are you okay? Nantion asked with concern, as it's been a while since she had last woke up in a cold sweat. However, unlike the other times, there was a new glimmer in her eyes, a hint of her fighting spirit. Not yet, huh? She thought to herself with a sigh. I'm fine. Shiro replied with a nod. She knew that she couldn't overcome her fear that easily. But even so, this was the first step. If she can act against it once, she can do it again. She had to admit that she was scared. She was completely fearful of his presence, but for the one she cherished, she had to set aside this fear. She didn't want to betray the hopes that they had for her. She didn't want to let down Nantion, who had taken care of her broken self month after month without complaining. She didn't want to stay in state. When Lyrica returns, she wants to stand proudly so that they won't worry about her. Say, little Tion, Shiro said as Nantion raised his eyebrow at the fact that she was calling him by his nickname that she had given him. What is it? I want to recover, or at least leave this room by next month. I might become a little unsightly. Promise me you won't laugh or feel disgusted, okay? Shiro said as Nantion nodded without hesitation. Of course, I've already seen you at your worst, so I won't be dissuaded by something like this. The only path left is up. Nantion smiled as Shiro felt relieved in her heart. There was a warm feeling spreading through her body as she could feel her willpower reigniting. Taking a deep breath, she got out of the bed and walked towards the door as Nantion followed behind her wordlessly. After that day, Shiro pushed herself ceaselessly. She would force herself to reach for the door even when it forced her to pass out. Even when she is falling down, she'd try to reach for the door. She clawed away at her fear, as even an inch of progress was welcomed. When resting, she confronted her inner demon even if it made her sick to the stomach. Every single moment was used for confronting her fear to the point that she wouldn't notice when others are watching her from afar. Ian would deliver food and cheer Shiro on in her mind before leaving so as to not distract her. Madison would observe from the end of the hallway, hoping that she'd reach the door. She had decided to go to the demon realm, but before she left, she wanted to see Shiro overcome the first barrier. Day after day, week after week, Shiro inched closer with each attempt. She looked haggard, but the fighting spirit in her eyes never decreased. Each step would only make her burn brighter. The gap between her and the door decreased until it was just an arm's length away. Grabbing the handle, Shiro could feel crippling fear clutch her heart as a dark shadow loomed over her. However, She's tired of just cowering away in a corner. Even if she never overcomes this fear, she still wanted to face it head-on. Like Nantian said, she had already reached her worst. All that's left is going up. She might look terrified and her knees might threaten to give up, but at least it was not in a tiny closed-off room. Gritting her teeth, Shiro gripped the door handle as hard as she could and pushed open the door with all her might. As she took the first step out of this room after several months of crippling anxiety, Shiro felt relieved. A cool gust of wind brushed her hair out of her face as she stood outside the med bay. Opening her mouth, her lips quivered as she continued to look forward. "I'm finally out," she muttered softly. You are. I'm finally out," Shiro repeated, tears welling up in her eyes as she looked back at Nantian. Her hair stuck to the sides of her face as cold sweat filled her head. Tears streamed down her face as she smiled towards him. Despite her disheveled appearance, it was the most beautiful smile Nantian had ever seen. "Congratulations." Staying silent, Shiro drank her juice in the command center while hugging her knees on the chair. She still couldn't let go of Nantian's sleeve, but she was now comfortable enough to walk around for a bit. However, she had more serious worries right now. I totally cried in front of him. "What the F***ck do I mean? I'm finally out," Shiro shouted in her mind as her mental self was currently rolling around in agony. She would occasionally glance up to see Nantian's expression only to see that he would smile at her whenever she did this. Naturally, this caused her to blush in embarrassment since she was a complete mess when she left the med bay. So how long was I out of commission for?" Shiro asked, wanting to think about something else for now. You've been out for 3.5 months. There has been 2 events, with the first victor being the Beast Queen and the second victor being, surprisingly, the Ice Queen," Nantian said as he projected the information on a second screen. Seems like the system is giving out events every 1.5 months, give or take. So I'd say there's probably going to be a third event in a month's time then," Shiro muttered as Nantian raised an eyebrow. "Are you planning to participate?" he asked curiously. However, the moment he mentioned her participation, Shiro's body tensed up. Forcing a smile, she shook her head. "I don't know. It depends. If my body stops freezing up in the middle of a fight, maybe." Shiro sighed. Glancing down at her hand, she shook her head. "Setting that aside for now, can you show me everything that's happened in Asharia? I can't use mana or divine energy just yet, but I still want to know what's been happening," Shiro asked as Nantian nodded his head. Sending her the information, he organized it so that the minor problems that he could solve easily didn't need to be looked at. Most of them were the major changes, such as the decreasing power output of the anchors due to Isilia's absence. We're quite behind in development, huh?" Shiro smiled sadly, since they could be in a much better position had she not been stuck in the med bay for almost 4 months. The mechs were barely running since most of the power was needed for the city, so the soldiers were training physically instead. Li Jian was currently teaching them, so she didn't need to worry about their martial prowess. As she was reading through the notes, she saw that her father had started to train in order to prepare himself for reaching Tier 6. But the problem with what he's doing right now was that he was clawing away at the chance tirelessly. For something like inspiration to reach Tier 6, you need to have a calm mind and comprehend what you want to focus on. If he continued at this pace, he'll never reach Tier 6. I'll go talk to Dad. As for Mom, seems like she left like Lyrica. Shiro's gaze flickered after seeing Mio being absent from the city for quite a while now. Her last message was that she was returning to the Reaper realm for a while, so they didn't need to worry about her safety. Keiko's doing fine, and Kiyomi is training herself with Dad. Ian and Lysandra are out searching for the artifacts, so they're preoccupied. As she continued to flip through the notes, she realized that most of them didn't need her intervention, as everyone had things covered. Aram was practically running the second city all by herself at this point, since the power generated there was much smaller than the main city. "I suppose my main goal for now is to make a full recovery and regain the use of my mana and divine energy. Researching my condition with Aram and Sylvia should be fine. Maybe I should try moving my body a little for some light sparring." Shiro thought to herself. Do you want to do a bit of sparring?" "I want to move my body a little since I haven't done anything," Shiro asked as Nantian nodded his head. "Of course. What kind of sparring are we talking about? Just hand-to-hand, or are weapons and magic involved?" "Just hand-to-hand. Nothing too serious." Shiro waved her hand dismissively. She couldn't even reinforce her body with mana right now, so sparring with weapons or magic wouldn't really work. Plus, she just wanted to see if she can still fight like how she used to. But just a question for me. How will you spar with me if you continue to hold me sleeve without letting go?" Nantian asked, pointing at her hand that was holding onto his sleeve. Cough, I think just a little while should be fine. Shiro blushed as she felt a little embarrassed. After being stuck in the med bay all this time, Nantian had kind of become her emotional pillar. She would be a little stressed out and restless if she didn't grab his sleeve to make sure he was around. But as long as she kept him within her sight, it should be okay. Making their way to the training hall, Shiro saw that all the halls were free since it's still early. Picking the first one they could find, she took a deep breath and let go of Nantian. Closing her eyes, she took a few deep breaths before opening her eyes and saw that Nantian was looking at her with concern. We can start," Shiro said as she raised her hands awkwardly. "You can make the first move." Hearing this, Shiro furrowed her brows but nodded her head. Thinking back to how she fought, Shiro took a step forward and dashed towards Nantian. Her movements were a lot slower than her usual speed, but her eyes were focused. Stomping down, she changed her attack direction at the last moment before launching a kick towards Nantian's head. Catching the leg with ease, Nantian took a step back as Shiro would normally follow this up with a second kick using her spare foot. Her first kick would never be at full power unless she was sure there's an opportunity. So as long as he took a step back to forcefully disperse the power gathered, her second kick should be just as weak as her first. Seeing this, Shiro furrowed her brows as launching her follow-up kick would just be going into a trap. But with her left foot caught in his hand, her movements were a little restrained. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro shifted her body as she practically bent herself in half. Elbowing towards Nantian's head, she could see that he was going to guard his face when she changed her attack and converted it to a grapple instead. However, the moment she did this, her joints cracked as her shoulder was dislocated for a moment. Furrowing her brows, she halted the spar and gripped her shoulder. The stress is a bit too much for a non-reinforced body, huh? Shiro sighed. Do you need a healing spell? Nantian asked, but Shiro shook her head. I won't need healing for an injury like this. Shiro laughed, popping her shoulder back in. She moved her arm around to make sure that everything was fine. Well, I guess we know my current combat standards. My body can't keep up. If I don't reinforce it with mana, I suppose I won't be able to fight properly. Though if you think about it, it's exactly because of my destructive fighting style and choices that led up to what had happened. Shiro smiled, thinking back to the watchman. Holding Nantian's sleeves to calm her nerves, she sighed. I think I might have been able to fare better and maybe even prevent Icilia from being taken if I wasn't riddled with injuries. The fight didn't even last 10 seconds. Even if he didn't attack me, I would have self-destructed from the damage I was causing to myself. Shiro muttered. Perhaps. So why don't we see if we can develop a non-destructive style for you to use right now? Nantian suggested as Shiro thought about it for a moment before nodding. I suppose I'll work more on my ice magic. Big Sis did say that my magic had a lot of potential, but I focused on the martial skills along with my nanotech. Shiro smiled. But we'll need you to regain your use of magic first, no? Setting that aside, are you hungry? You haven't eaten anything at all yet. In should be coming back soon, so she'll be able to cook you something. Nantian chuckled. I can finally eat some proper meals rather than the light stuff she's been making. Shiro agreed as they made their way towards the food hall. Hi, Mom. When did you become more gluttonous than me? In asked as cold sweat dripped off her face. TCH, a bit rude. Your mother's been eating nothing but light food for 3.5 months, and this is what you say when I want a little bit of meat. Shiro pouted as she still had her spoon in her mouth. Hearing this, Yin's smile twitched as she had been doing nothing but eat for the past 3 hours now. She returned during the second hour, and she figured that Shiro would be finished soon, but no. She kept going. Yin thought that she would at least try to eat less or act more refined since Nantian was here, but her eating style was barbaric to say the least. Please eat slowly, you'll choke. Yin sighed as she sat down. Lysandra was also nearby, but she didn't want to get too close in case Shiro's fear acted up. Why aren't you sitting down as well, Lisa? Shiro asked, seeing Lysandra stand silently in the corner. Can I? Lysandra asked as Shiro raised her eyebrow before pausing in realization. During the time she was in the room, Lysandra had the least amount of contact. It was no wonder that Lysandra might be a little hesitant, feeling bad inside. Shiro smiled and gestured for her to sit down near her. It's okay, come and sit down. Shiro smiled as she continued to eat. It was a little difficult to eat at her pace with just one hand since the other was holding on to Nantian, but he used magic to stabilize the bowls, so she didn't need to worry. Most of the food that she ate was converted into mana, so it was only natural that she wasn't feeling satisfied just yet. After all, Her mana pool could be called an ocean. While there still seemed to be something blocking her use of mana, Shiro felt healthier in a way since she was a monster after all. Mana was the core of her being. Similar to how vampires will become lethargic without blood, spirits and monsters that depend on mana as their main source of energy will be weakened. Sure, they might be able to constantly generate mana within their bodies, but it would still cause them to hunger. Seeing that Shiro assured her that it was okay, Lysandra hesitated for a moment before sitting next to Shiro. As she continued her meal, Shiro noticed that Lysandra was glancing at her occasionally. Is something wrong? Shiro asked as Lysandra hesitated for a moment before making up her mind. Hugging Shiro, Lysandra's shoulders started quivering as she opened her mouth. I'm glad that you're safe, Mom, Lysandra said as Shiro paused and smiled. Amen. I'm sorry for not coming out sooner. But that reminds me, that's the first time you've properly called me Mom, huh? Shiro smiled as Lysandra nodded her head. So sorry to crash the parade, but how will you eat if both your hands are occupied? Ian asked as she rested her chin on her palm. Why don't you feed me, darling? You seemed to do a good job a few months ago. Shiro chuckled as Ian rolled her eyes. Shuffling her chair closer, she wordlessly picked up the bowl and spoon. I'll ask for my hug later since Lil Sis hasn't been spending time with you as much as I have, Ian said as she started to feed Shiro. After finishing the meal, Lysandra helped Ian clean up the dishes while Shiro rested next to Nantion. Pulling out her phone, Shiro wondered what she should be doing now. She wanted to set up a plan of action for a month's time so that they can participate in the next event. I need to recover the use of mana and divine energy along with waking Nimue, Izul, and Addy. Shiro thought to herself, since she hasn't been able to access her mana realm at all. She guessed that her mana realm will probably unlock once her use of mana returns. If you're worried about your use of mana, it might be good to ask Aram about it. We still need to tell everyone else about your recovery, so this might be a good chance to call for a party meeting. Nantion smiled, but Shiro shook her head. It's fine. There's no need for a meeting. They're all busy, so we'll just visit them one by one. Let's go to Madison first, though. She looked like she wanted to say something earlier when I managed to get a glimpse of her. Shiro smiled as she stretched her body lightly. All right, I finished washing up the dishes. I will request for my hug now. Ian smiled as she held out her arms in a position perfect for receiving a hug. Hearing this, Shiro smiled and stood up. Letting go of Nantion's sleeve for a moment, she hugged Ian. Sorry for making you worry. Shiro muttered. What is there to be sorry about? You always make us worry. In fact, I'll be more concerned if you didn't make us worry. Ian replied as her voice started to become shaky. But don't ever make us worry like that ever again. Hearing this, Shiro paused for a moment before nodding. Amen, I won't. Staying in silence, Shiro hugged Ian. After a long moment, they separated as Ian wiped her face. First of all, Mom, you are filthy, Ian said cheekily as Shiro's smile twitched. Excuse me, what? Shiro asked, feeling as though a vein was about to burst. You haven't changed your clothes today, have you? I just came back not too long ago after all, and it stinks like sweat. You should really change or get a shower after finally getting out. Ian smiled as Shiro paused. Wait, does it smell that bad? Shiro asked hesitantly, as she had been holding on to Nantion this entire time. Don't listen to her, Mom. Yin's only saying that since she wants to dress you up. She's bought a bunch of clothes from the tailors around the city. They've been coming out with new designs, and Ian figured that you might look good in them. Lysandra called out as Ian coughed. Stop spoiling the surprise. Ian pouted. Yeah, but you're embarrassing, Mom. Lysandra furrowed her brows. Shrugging her shoulders, Ian jogged towards the main doors. I'll send the clothes to your room, Mom. Seeing that Ian has already ran off, Shiro sighed helplessly before glancing at Nantion. You don't stink. Nantion immediately said out loud, just in case Shiro was concerned about that. I wasn't about to say anything about that. I'm going to go for a quick shower and get changed. Will you, wait in the room? Shiro asked, feeling embarrassed. Of course. Nantion nodded. Don't look okay? Shiro warned, nodding his head. He knew that he might not be able to sit down if he did. But more than that, it'll be betraying her trust in him. I'll go help Sis bring the clothes over then, Lysandra said as Shiro nodded her head. Making their back to her room, Shiro grabbed a spare change of clothes along with a few towels before glancing back to see Nantion sitting in the corner working on the tablet. It's just a few minutes. What am I being scared for? Shiro thought to herself as she locked the door behind her and took off her clothes. As she had a quick shower, she felt as though a shadow flickered in the corner of her peripherals. Immediately turning around, she saw that there was nothing and sighed. Quickly finishing her shower, she got changed and glanced in the mirror. For a split moment, Shiro thought the watchman was standing beside her as her breathing hastened. Punching towards where the watchman would have been, Shiro's fist cracked against the wall as she frowned before brushing her hair out of her face. Sighing heavily, she grabbed her towel and exited the bathroom. Seeing Nantian sitting in the same place with a concerned face, Shiro didn't say anything and just sat down before clutching his sleeve. Did something happen? Nantian asked as Shiro nodded her head. Just hallucinating. Shiro replied softly as she laid down and closed her eyes. Hearing a knock on the door, Shiro sat up since she knew that it was probably Ian and Lysandra. Do you want to rest for a bit first? Nantian asked as Shiro shook her head. It's fine. I just needed a moment to calm down. Shiro smiled. It was good to take her mind off this as well. Just as she called Ian to enter, she saw Lysandra check the space before unloading outfit after outfit from her inventory. Shiro had to admit, it was a little intimidating.